Man that finds his wife unresponsive in their bed is soon faced with an impossible decision. While most people try not to think about a situation where someone needs to decide whether or not to take them off life support, it does happen. Making sure that you have a do not resuscitate policy established is important if you don't want to wind up indefinitely in a vegetative state. When Ryan Finley tried to wake his wife up one weekend morning, he had no idea that his walk up the stairs would send him headfirst into a husband's worst nightmare. In a matter of hours, he was forced to make a decision that no one should ever have to make, and things only got stranger from there. The Finley family from Oklahoma loved to have leisurely weekends during the summer. Husband Ryan would sit on the porch and enjoy a coffee in the morning while his wife Jill slept in and relaxed. But one Sunday morning in 2007, Ryan wanted to wake Jill up a little earlier than usual so they could enjoy the beautiful summer morning together. But when he entered the room, Ryan made a discovery that stopped him dead in his tracks. His wife wasn't breathing. In a panic, he called 911. Soon, medics arrived and used a defibrillator on Jill for several minutes while Ryan watched in horror. Unable to get a heartbeat, the medics prepped Jill for transport. Even while moving Jill out of the house on a stretcher, a medic was applying chest compressions the entire time. They knew without constant care it was unlikely they'd be able to bring Jill back. Jill was taken to the Oklahoma Heart Hospital, where doctors rushed her into the emergency room and put her on a respirator. She was getting the oxygen that she needed, but she was far from out of harm's way. You see, the doctors determined Jill had a heart attack while sleeping, and her brain was deprived of oxygen for almost 5 whole minutes. She was wrapped up in a cooling pad to prevent further brain damage, but still didn't wake. Worse yet, she was showing little brain activity. Soon, Jill officially fell into a coma. Ryan spent as much time as he could by his wife's side. He read Bible verses daily and even wrote down his thoughts to her in the form of letters, which he kept in a notebook. Even though hope was grim, he refused to give it up. Was there any hope? Doctors offered little relief when they spoke to Ryan. They told him there was only about a 1% chance Jill would make any kind of recovery. Worse yet, it had already been 2 weeks and Jill wasn't showing any signs of progress. After 14 days with an unresponsive Jill, Ryan knew that he had to start making some tough calls. He contacted his wife's parents to help decide what steps should be taken next. Ryan feared the only thing to do was take Jill off life support. Ryan and Jill didn't have an official plan in place if one of them was on life support, but an incident with Ryan's aunt a few years earlier gave him an indication what her wishes might have been. See, when Ryan's aunt was placed on life support, Jill told her husband she would never want to be kept alive in a vegetative state. So after consulting with Jill's parents, Ryan chose to take his wife off life support and end her suffering. The doctors explained that Jill would still remain alive for a short while after, and during that time frame, family and friends could say their goodbyes. Ryan, absolutely distraught, waited by his wife's side for the end to come. Ryan took a short video on his cell phone of her so he could always remember their final moments, and then he went into the lobby to wait. However, not long after, nurses urged him to return to the room. Miraculously, Jill's body started shifting in her hospital bed. After a few minutes, she even began to mumble some words. The doctors, nurses, and Ryan were stunned. Then Jill opened her eyes for the first time in 2 weeks. She opened her mouth and said, "Get me out of here." Within minutes, she'd been speaking coherently and answering all of her husband's questions. A miracle had occurred. Jill awoke hours after being removed from life support. No one could explain what happened. It took a few days for Jill to feel significantly better, but once she did, doctors explained to her and Ryan what put her in the coma. Unbeknownst to Jill, she had a condition that caused her heart to stop pumping. Shockingly, within just a few days, Jill was back at home. However, it took months for her to relearn many basic tasks such as teeth brushing and shoe tying. She also had a pacemaker put in and worked with occupational and speech therapists. Jill didn't blame Ryan at all for the decision he made to remove her breathing tube. There was no way of knowing if she would make a full recovery, and although extremely difficult, it was the right decision. After Jill made a full recovery, the couple became even closer. They developed a renewed love and appreciation for life and family. She thanked her lucky stars for a husband like Ryan. That heartbreaking moment when a doctor delivers terrible news to a patient happens all too often. And although the news may not always be a death sentence, if a doctor gets serious, you know what follows is going to be challenging at the very least. On Mother's Day 2014, Darla Rogers and her husband Tim were having a mellow celebration at their home. While they were watching a movie in their living room, Darla was struck with severe pains in her abdomen. As the pain worsened, Tim didn't want to take any chances with Darla's health, so he drove her to a nearby hospital. He wanted a doctor to examine her just in case the pain was something serious, like appendicitis. Once at the hospital, doctors took a sample of blood from Darla and, after examining it, determined a short-notice CAT scan was warranted. This wasn't at all what Darla and Tim were expecting. They prayed nothing serious would come of it. After the CAT scan was complete, Darla and Tim waited anxiously in the hospital room for the results. After what seemed like hours, the doctor came back and he had a grim look on his face. He stared at the couple intently before pulling out the results of the CAT scan. He then spoke 3 words that made both Darla and Tim go numb with fear. "You have cancer." Darla's world instantly collapsed. More specifically, the doctors told Darla she had stage 4 colon cancer, and within 6 months she would die. She checked herself into the Huntsman Cancer Hospital in Salt Lake City, Utah, and began an intense chemotherapy regimen in hopes she could beat the odds. Like nearly all parents who underwent chemo, she began to get sick from the constant radiation flooding her body. Finally, one doctor stepped in with a totally different plan. His name was Dr. Glenn Gilcrease, and he was an associate professor of oncology. He feared the approach Darla was taking would have detrimental effects on her liver, so he put her on a lower chemotherapy dose. However, he also wanted to get a second opinion on the matter. Dr. Gilcrease consulted with a close colleague and section chief for interventional radiology, Ryan O'Hara. After an in-depth discussion about the safest option for Darla, both men agreed on a potential solution. It was called radioembolization. The intricate process would launch millions of microscopic radioactive beads directly into Darla's bloodstream, where they'd lodge themselves into her body and slowly destroy the tumor. It was a complicated procedure that didn't always work. The doctors also had access to SIR spheres, minuscule spheres infused with a special radioactive isotope used for battling cancer. The level of radioactivity in SIR spheres was much safer than most other cancer-fighting medications. With all these tools at hand, Darla's operation began. Dr. O'Hara and 6 of his colleagues spent hours operating on Darla. For 8 days after the operation, she went through intense and often painful specialized treatments. However, on the 9th day, miraculously, she felt better than she had in months. She didn't want to get her hopes up, however. Cancer, as she knew, is ruthless, and it can creep up again at any moment. A few weeks after her invasive operation, doctors ran some tests and came back to her with news. The tumors on her lungs and liver had disappeared. Her body took to the SIR spheres. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't need chemotherapy. She also became very close with a woman who went through a similar experience. Her name was Suzanne Lindley, and she was a 19-year cancer survivor. She was also the founder of a Texas-based cancer support group called Yes, Beat Liver Tumors. Suzanne, having lived through cancer herself, took Darla under her wing. Not only did Suzanne shower Darla with emotional support, but she made Darla the poster child for her support group. Darla embraced the opportunity and involved herself in as many fundraisers and opportunities to help others as possible. A lot of amazing opportunities came along because of Darla's involvement with Suzanne's group. She was invited to the Academy Awards one year, and she went to the People's Choice Awards. But neither of those compared to one incredible event she took part in. Darla walked down the runway for a special fashion show that featured cancer survivors. It was an incredible opportunity to spread a positive message for those who were braving a battle of their own. Of course, Darla couldn't have done any of this without one particular person. Her husband, Tim, showed a level of support and understanding matched by no one else in her life. He was by her side the entire time and always made sure to keep her mood up. Finally cancer-free, Darla made it her mission to live every day to the fullest.